Howdy folks. We're going to talk a little bit about the Berta Rotary Plow in terms of what all the stuff is that comes with the thing when you buy one. So this is a rotary plow to fit a BCS. We also carry them to fit the Gorilla walk-behind tractors. Taped to the top of the rotary plow, you're going to find the owner's manual from the manufacturer. There's a little DVD in there that kind of shows you what a great job it does. What they don't explain in the video though is any of the accessories, and they don't explain how to actually plow. They just assume that if you buy a plow, you know how to plow. Well, we've had a lot of people call and say, how the heck do you start plowing? Because, you know, when you don't come from an agricultural society, you may just not know intrinsically how to start your pattern in the field to plow effectively without leaving an unplowed spot. So one night I sat up till 2 in the morning and drew out this book. There's a bunch of hand-drawn pictures in here, little stick figures and stuff, little stick tractors, showing you the correct procedure for getting started with the plow in your field, and you know how it's going to end up. And then the second half of the book is how to build raised beds, because that's what a lot of people like to do with these things once their field is plowed. So the first half is plowing, second half of the book is raised bed building. Sorry about the poor art, but it usually gets the job done. So all that aside, there's some other stuff that comes with it. You're going to find a gauge wheel in there. The gauge wheel goes on the back of the plow, slips up into this receiver in the back, like so. Then a pin would go through here to lock it in place. So there's 5 height positions to control the depth of the plow, and then this very top hole in the rod here is a transport position. If you get it all the way up in that top position, it's going to hold the auger of the plow out of the ground so you can transport it from place to place. Long distances, obviously, if you're going a short distance, it's probably not worth putting it on. Now, a lot of the videos you'll see with the rotary plow in action show no gauge wheel on the plow, and this is quite possible to do. It will actually plow slightly deeper without the gauge wheel on it. You get about an extra inch of depth. But what you find when you're a novice with the rotary plow is that the rotary plow, suddenly there's somebody starting a truck. Blame GMC for the noise. So when you're starting out with the rotary plow and you've never done it before, you find right off that it's not quite as easy as what it looks like in the video, where these guys are just walking along and the plow is doing magical things and they're not even having their hands on the tractor. Because if you've got clay and you've got rocks, you're going to have some sideways action of the plow in the soil. That is, because this thing rotates this way, it's got some side thrust characteristics, and until you learn to work with that, the plow can be slightly challenging to run. When I first used the rotary plow in 2001, it kicked my rear end for the first 2 hours. And then when I got really exhausted and quit fighting it, it did a much better job. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is what you're supposed to do. Not try to make it do something, but just work with it. Anyway, what I also found is that using the gauge wheel initially, even if you push it all the way up to the maximum depth position, which does rob you of about an inch of total depth, you end up getting a little more control over it, because with the 2 wheels of the walk-behind tractor and then the single gauge wheel in the back, it gives you kind of a tripod effect. That is, you've got 2 solid wheels on the ground and you've got a solid wheel on the ground in the back, so you can kind of push down on the handlebars and lock that plow in place a little more. When you get good with the plow and you're kind of used to the action of it, you can go ahead and leave the gauge wheel off and get that extra inch of depth. But initially, you can think of this as a training wheel, that while you're getting your plow arms and legs developed, it helps you do that until you're old enough to, you know, do without it, just like the training wheel on the bike. So that's that thing. There's also a side shield included with the plow, and there's been a lot of misconceptions about this side shield. Some people think it has to go on there. It doesn't. It has nothing to do with safety. The gray side shield is simply to put on the discharge side of the plow, the discharge side being the right side on a single rotary plow. You put this on here if you want to limit the discharge. That is, if you don't want it to throw the soil as far. There's also a bumblebee around here, so he's on video too. So typically if you were just plowing new soil, like to break sod in a field, or if you're building raised beds, you don't want this thing on there. You want that soil to throw out to the maximum point, that is as far as it can, to give you a nice flat finish of the soil. You don't want ridges. If you want to create more of a ridge, or if you want to say hill potatoes or hill corn or something like this, and you want more of a limited ridge that the thing throws out, that's what this is for. You put this on there and it deflects that soil downward. Also very useful for creating, say, drainage swales, if you want the dirt piled up real nice on the edge. If you want to bury the edges of black plastic mulch that you're laying by hand, you can put that on there and just spray the soil right back on the black plastic mulch, or anything like that. Now, packaged with this, stuck in here, you'll see, can you get that from there? There are some things that have no relation to this gray shield at all. These are 4 replacement cutting tips for the bottom of the plowshare blades. They stick them in there so they don't get lost. They also have replacement nuts and bolts. So the idea is, we'll tip this plow over. These cutting tips on the bottom are replaceable and reversible. As the plowshare rotates, this is the first thing that enters the ground right there on the corner. So the wear occurs right on the corner of that plow tip, and they'll wear back at sort of a 45-degree angle. The material starts disappearing kind of like this. So what you need to do as the user of the plow is pay attention to the wear that's on these tips, because as these things wear, they will get to sort of the halfway point when they're about half gone, you know, compared to this remaining surface that's here. And then you have to flip it over so you can wear out this corner. If you just tune out and just continue wearing, you get to where they're up to about here, and then it's kind of gone. If you flip it over, there's not enough material there to make it worthwhile. You would have to just reverse it and use this other end. But if used correctly and switched correctly, you can wear all 4 corners off these things, which gives you the maximum life expectancy. Then you've got a spare set that's packaged with the plow. By keeping these tips changed and reversed when they need to be, these plowshares will last much longer because the wear does not occur on the yellow plowshares. It's occurring on these black tips. There is also a grass cutting blade, they call it, mounted at the top of the plowshare assembly. There are these flat things. There's one on each side of the rotor. And they, as the plowshare rotor turns, they sort of interface with this fixed black blade that's here. So as the rotor turns, these two flat blades on the plow are kind of moving just past this blade. It's kind of a shearing action. That's to, if you get any tall grass that you're working in or cover crop, everything that tries to wrap around the rotor gets sheared off right there. Now, the owner's manual for the plow says that in rocky soil conditions, you should remove these blades. We found that not to be necessary and actually counterproductive, particularly removing this blade. You don't want to remove this because this serves not only as a guard, if you do pick up a rock and it hits against here, this protects the gearbox itself from getting hit by the rock. So it's kind of like a bumper, and it's also strengthening this between this point and this point, so it's like an extra strengthening brace. We've seen some guys remove this, get a rock up in there, and actually break their gearbox. In those cases, Berta actually said, well, that shouldn't have happened. They gave the guy a new gearbox, but still, you don't want to have to deal with a broken gearbox. So just leave those blades in place. We've never seen them to cause any worse problem with jamming rocks than when they're not on there. So I think that pretty much covers that stuff. The only other thing that's in the box is the OSHA guard, as we call it. It goes on the back of the plow here. You'll see a picture on the owner's manual with it mounted. This is to keep your leg from going in the plow. Unfortunately, it's also to bust your shins on. So it's up to you whether you want to put it on there or not. You know, for certain countries, I think it's mandatory. I think in Germany, they have some real strict safety standards. This type of very wide protection probably is not required for the North American market, but they include it anyway. But it's curious that most of the videos you see online don't have that thing mounted, including the one from the Berta factory. So it's up to you. There it is. Also makes a nice wall hanging if you're into that sort of metal. So that's it. Now I'm going to plug the tractor up to this thing. Carry this outside. The plow weighs about 95 pounds, so you have to have just 3 or 4 Wheaties for breakfast. And then when you bring the tractor back onto the plow, this is a BCS 853, lined up. And then you'll notice that the plow won't sock all the way up to the tractor. You're like, man, they put the flange on this plow crooked. It doesn't work. These little Allen head bolts don't line up with the holes in the quick coupling. Well, no, it was designed this way. And if you watch any of the videos carefully, you'll see that when the plow is properly mounted to the tractor, it's actually at a slightly different angle from the tractor. Like that. Right there. Now the quick hitch pin drops in, everything locks down. So the plow is canted at about a 15-degree angle to the tractor. This is to make up for the fact that when you're plowing a field, this wheel is going to go down in the furrow that was created by your last plow pass. And with this wheel in the furrow and this on the unplowed ground, the angle of the plow actually becomes flat. So this just compensates for that. Your first couple passes with the plow, it never goes quite as deep because the angle is a cock because both wheels are on flat ground. So you just live with that and go 6 or 8 inches deep on the first pass and 10 or 12 inches deep on all the other passes. That's it. Thanks for watching.